let's go ahead and try to deploy it. So I'm going to cd out of here, and then we're going to run SLS. You can either run serverless in this format, or you can use the abbreviated version. Let's just go ahead and use the abbreviation because it's a little bit easier. So we're going to say serverless deploy. That means package up my stuff and then deploy it to AWS. We need to add a profile in here. If you remember back just a second ago, if I open up the terminal, we set the profile right here as SRA tutorial or serverless tutorial, right? So let's copy that. Then we're going to add a section here underneath provider called profile. And we're going to put serverless tutorial. So this is important. If you don't have this, it may not work. So we're going to say SLS deploy, and then we're going to say -b. So what this should do is this should deploy it to where we want it to go. But one thing that we need to consider is what region do we want this to deploy to. So with AWS, there's a ton of regions. So let's open up CloudFormation. So it looks like up here in the browser, you can see region is equal to US East 2. So that's what we're going to use here. So I'm going to copy this US East 2. Then we're going to switch back to our serverless.yaml. And we're going to add something called region US East 2. So now when we actually run this serverless deploy, it's now going to deploy a Lambda function with Node.js 10 to the provider AWS, using the AWS profile that we set as serverless tutorial. That gives it the access key and secret access key to then send our stuff and authenticate with AWS. And then we're going to say the region is US East 2. And we're doing that because if you look here at this list, you can use any one of these regions to deploy your stuff. You can use North Virginia, North Carolina, or California, Oregon, Hong Kong, Mumbai, Singapore, Sydney, Tokyo. You can choose those as your region, and then they'll have a little string here that says like, SA for like South, or something like SP for like South Pacific, or something like that, right? Which basically is the code that correlates to that region. So for us, US East 2 is the code that corresponds to Ohio. So now let's run it, and we'll see what happens. So right off the bat, we can see some stuff coming out in the terminal below. So let me kind of blow this up, make it a little bit bigger. So the first thing that's happening is that it's packaging our service. It's excluding development dependencies, so it's making our package smaller. Then it's creating the stack, which would be these files here, these CloudFormation templates, which we saw were hundreds of lines. And then it's checking the stack create progress. So what that means is that right here, you see this block of stuff, which is create in progress, create in progress, create in progress, create complete, create complete. And so this right here, this create in progress, this is feedback from AWS CloudFormation that's saying it's starting to try to deploy what you've asked for inside this serverless.yaml file. So for instance, every serverless framework project gets an AWS S3 bucket. It's called a serverless deployment bucket. And so you can see that it's creating it, and then you can see down here it's actually completed creating it. And you can see here that it's creating the stack, and then you can see that it completed creating the stack. And then after that, we have stack create finished, uploading CloudFormation file to S3. And then if I scroll up a little bit more, we can see that it uploaded the artifacts into that S3 bucket. So now it has our handler.js file on AWS. And then we can see it's uploading the SRA tutorial zip file, which is 386 bytes. And then it's validating the template, updating the stack, and then checking the stack update progress. So as it's going through here, we can see things are being created. So it's create in progress for the IAM role. This is generated automatically, by the way, by the serverless framework. So that's why you didn't see anything about IAM roles. AWS log group, so you don't see anything about that either. It's being generated automatically. And then you can see the stuff is finishing. And then finally, it starts building our actual AWS Lambda function called hello Lambda function. And if you remember, that's what we called this function out here was hello. And so create in progress, and then it finishes creating it. So now we have an AWS Lambda function deployed with our code that's inside this handler.js file. And then it's finally update complete. And so when it hit update complete, that is the last step in the CloudFormation process. That's something that you can check for to see, if your stack was deployed successfully or not. And underneath here, we have this service information. So right away, you can see the service is called SRA tutorial. And if you remember seeing that inside of here, you see the service name is SRA tutorial. You can see the stage is dev. This is the default for the serverless framework. We can actually change this, and we will change it as we start getting more complex with our application. Then you can see a region here, US East 2, directly matching what we put in the serverless.yaml. Then you can see this full stack name of this entire thing that we did. You know, as we talked about, the full recipe name is SRA tutorial dev. So what it does is it takes the service name, which is SRA tutorial, and it combines it with the stage. That allows it to be dynamic, because if you make the stage, you know, test, then this stack name is going to be called SRA tutorial-test. If you change it to QA, it's going to be called SRA tutorial-QA. And that's how you can have these multiple stages, where you have this whole application running on 3 different stages, all using this one serverless.yaml file by changing one variable. That's how powerful this is. And then underneath that, you have a resource count. We've got 5 resources. API keys, endpoints, your functions are listed here. If you have a Lambda layer, which is a new functionality, we probably won't get into it quite yet. And then the ARN here. With all this stuff, we are ready to go. So let me clear this out. Or actually, I'll just keep this as is, but we're going to switch back to the AWS console. We're going to confirm that it works real quick. So if we refresh this, we can see here, we have a new stack called SRA tutorial dev. We're inside the CloudFormation. So if you don't have this open, you can search for CloudFormation. Right there. And then down here, we have the stack name SRA tutorial dev. Update complete, that's the finished status. We can click inside of here and we can see a whole bunch of stuff. So this is all the stuff that we were seeing in the terminal output, if you remember. That's there. And then we have the resources which were created. So you can see the hello Lambda function, the version, the log group, the IAM role, and the deployment bucket. And then we've got a whole bunch of other stuff in here like outputs, parameters, tags, rollback triggers, policy, chain sets, all this type of stuff too. With that, let's go ahead and stop the video here. And then in the next video, we're going to jump into testing this Lambda function just to see if it works. And then we'll start getting into a lot of the details. See you there.